I'm of absolutely no help.
Well, we are now live on both YouTube and Facebook, so it looks like it's working fine on everyone's ends. Give me just 1 minute while I share this out and have Facebook alert people that we're live. Share. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Sorry for the delay on that. Thank you everyone for tuning in, and good afternoon. I am Juliette Abdel, President and CEO of the Westminster Chamber of Commerce. If you are a new viewer, please make sure that you hit the like button on our page, hit the follow so you can get those timely alerts when we do go live. For those of you that are returning back, thank you for staying engaged and realizing that I changed up the time in at least 2 of our weekly broadcasts this week. So appreciate you for keeping track of where things are at. Now, you know I like to give shout outs to people that are on here with me, and generally I can do that by just tuning in on my side on my mobile device, but my phone's about to die. So you have to humor me by commenting on the comment section of this broadcast. Let me know if you're picking up any information that's beneficial to you, or if you just have questions that you would like for our speakers to take a part in. Now, these video broadcasts we kicked off back in March. We originally had them as a way to educate our businesses on how they can adapt in the time of COVID, with business experts that allowed you to learn more about online platforms and video types of conferencing. And now they're more structured, and we feature partners that are very industry specific. Those are our town halls like the one today. We have our nonprofit corners, of course, our business success series, and we start the week off with our mayor who gives us an update on COVID in our community. Now, today's broadcast will be available to you at any point in time to view in the video section of this Facebook page. You can also find it on YouTube, where we are also streaming live right now. That's Westminster Chamber of Commerce. And you have not already done so already, please connect with us on Instagram and on Twitter at Westy Chamber. Now, today's topic is related to transportation. I have been bringing this topic up over the last several months from different lenses. So we had with us CDOT, we've had Dr. Cod, we've had Smart Commute, all the way to commuting solutions. And the reason that I'm doing that is transportation is a hot issue for us. As everyone knows, from traffic concerns to roads and access to different modes of transportation. So the best way that we can do our part is by understanding from the different groups that are out there and different experts, their perspectives, their opinions, and the different factoids that are there. So today we have with us both the Colorado Auto Dealers Association, Tim Jackson, and we have Freedom to Drive Coalition's Kelly Sloan. Now, both of them are going to provide updates for us, some information. I like this to be engaging. So believe it or not, I will be entertaining comments that are compliments or questions that might be slighted. I will change it and add some humor to it. We really want you to digest this information. And the best way that we can do that is by creating this informal platform for you to engage with us. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Tim and mute myself. I just wanted to go ahead and just quickly feature this link for you. When you do start commenting, I will be able to see any of those comments. We'll pull those up toward the end of the broadcast, whether it's comments or questions. So you are encouraged to take notes and let us know what they are. Tim, I'm muting myself and you can take it over.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And I appreciate the opportunity to be with you today. My name is Tim Jackson. I'm serve as CEO of the Colorado Automobile Dealers Association. And On the screen, you should have right now an image of a modern new car dealership. We want to walk through some of the issues around mobility and transportation and the automotive sector, specifically around cars. And to do that, I want to start at the beginning, where the modern auto industry started, with a guy by the name of Henry Ford. Henry Ford was recognized, by the way, by Time magazine as one of the top 100 innovators of all time. I personally believe that if Henry Ford would have been, if Time magazine had identified the top 10 innovators, Henry Ford would be in that category too. But he's definitely in the top 100. And a lot of the innovations that Henry Ford envisioned way back in the early 1900s have not only come to fruition, but are a part of the modern auto industry today. One of those is the assembly line process. At the time, Henry Ford was starting Ford Motor Company, as well as General Motors coming together across town, same year, 1908. Both Henry Ford and General Motors, through Ransom Eli Olds, the founder of Oldsmobile, were franchising new car dealers. In fact, some of those new car dealers were right here in Colorado, and some of those new car dealers that were right here in Colorado are still in business today, 112 years later. So it's pretty impressive on longevity how that's worked. But Henry Ford wanted to mass produce a car and make it affordable for the masses. So the original Model T filled that bill, and it was really the first mass producer of cars in the U.S. and around the world. The other thing, he wanted to offload the distribution of those cars, because Henry Ford was smart enough to know that he had his hands full on designing the cars, building those cars, hiring the people it took to build the cars, buying the parts, tools, and equipment it took to build the cars, building the factories and the assembly line process. He wanted to offload everything that dealers do, which are inventorying the cars, taking trades, valuing trades, doing test drives, handling parts, service, warranty, as well as financing the cars that they sell. So he started franchising dealers in 1908. And again, some of those are still in business today. Some of those, even in Colorado, are still in business today. So that's the Model T, and that's the assembly line process. The original Model T sold for $525. Definitely, it sounded like a lot of money at the time, but it was one of the least expensive cars on the market. Then there was Ransom Eli Olds, I mentioned. Ransom Olds grew up in Lansing, Michigan, just down the road from Detroit, in the state capital city of Michigan, and he started Oldsmobile. And he actually had an 1898 Olds, which you will see in this picture. And by the way, these were called the horseless carriages. Cars were originally called the horseless carriage. And the Ransom Olds also envisioned the franchise dealer network, as well as Henry Ford. And he also envisioned the assembly line process. The difference between Ransom Olds assembly line and Henry Ford's is that Ransom Olds assembly line, the cars stayed stable and the people worked the line down until they built each car in the same place. Henry Ford's envisioned moving the car along the assembly line, and it was Henry Ford's model of the assembly line process that worked out. And again, just up the road in Flint, Michigan, General Motors was coming together as a corporation also in 1908. And oh, by the way, the U.S. auto industry at that time had over 2,000 automakers. Some of those were right here in Colorado. One of those was right up in Longmont, Colorado, and it was an electric car company. Another was over in Estes Park. Everybody's heard of the Stanley Steamer. Everybody thinks of the Stanley Steamer as a carpet cleaner, but the original Stanley Steamer was actually a new car powered by steam. We have in Colorado, O'Meara Ford up at 104th and I-25, but the original O'Meara Ford was actually over at 14th Street in downtown Denver and Larimer Square. It was right where today is the University of Colorado, Denver. Their second location was up at 14th and Broadway. And this is a picture of that dealership. That's remained there at 14th and Broadway until Denver wanted to put a new public library in that space. So they knocked O'Meara Ford out through eminent domain. He had to find another place to go. He went over to 14th and Calumet, and later out to 104th and what is now I-25. It was just 104th and didn't have the I-25 corridor just yet. You see in the image here, Emig Oldsmobile. These are images of around the 1950s, 1960s new car dealership. And by the way, at that time, between 1908 and 1960, the car dealership industry was growing when it grew to a level of 50,000 dealerships. Right here in Colorado, there were new car dealerships in small towns as small as Brush, Colorado, which had 3, Palmer Lake and Larkspur, which had at least 2 each, and Sterling, Colorado, which had 13 different dealerships serving 24 different brands, all locally owned, all independently operated. Let's talk about the quality of the new car. The quality of the new car has grown exponentially, and the high water mark on traffic fatalities was hit in 1972, and it was about 52,000 traffic fatalities. But that number has declined year in and year out, and as recent as 2014, it was as low as 34,000. Now, what makes that interesting, over the past 50 years, we've generally declined in traffic fatalities, but what's happened at the same time is the number of vehicle miles traveled has more than tripled. So why are the traffic fatalities going down even as consumers drive more miles? Well, the cars are safer today than they've ever been. So new cars are the safest because of airbags and seat belts that are required in their manufacture. And now the public is starting to utilize seat belts a lot more than they used to. The next thing that new cars are much better on today than they were 20 or 30 years ago is tailpipe emissions. So we will all want clean air. I want clean air. You want clean air, hopefully. And the best way to get to clean air is to replace the old high emitting cars with new low emission or zero emission new vehicles. But new cars get cleaner and cleaner year in and year out. And every car that's sold on a dealership lot today, every new car that's sold on dealership lots today are 99% cleaner on tailpipe emissions. That's the brown cloud inducing, asthma contributing, ozone enhancing emissions than anything we had available for sale just 50 years ago. So if we really want to improve air quality, we have to find a way to take the old high emitting cars off the road and recycle them. The new car dealers in Colorado created a nonprofit called appropriately the Clear the Air Foundation. And that Clear the Air Foundation has now taken, this image says 4,500. It's now over 5,000 old high emitting cars off the road and recycled those. It's the only program like it in the country. We take the cars off the road and we replace them with newer, cleaner cars. And then the old car is recycled. The value of that car, which is not significant value, it's usually only $200 or $300. And the value of that car is rolled into scholarship funds for auto tech students. And we're now contributing up to $100,000 in auto tech scholarships to students each year. As the New York Times said recently, it's not just hybrids. Pickup trucks and sedans have gotten more efficient too, whether they're gasoline or diesel or hybrid or plug-in hybrid or electric. All the cars we sell today are much better on vehicle emissions than anything we had available for sale just 20 or 30 years ago. Next is the economic impact of new car dealers. 41,000 people in Colorado owe their jobs directly or indirectly to new car dealers, and they receive a total of $2.26 billion in compensation each year. Almost a quarter of the state sales and local sales taxes and use taxes come from the sale and service of new and used cars, and the average dealer spends $731,000 a year on advertising. Let's get into how local governments are making it harder for consumers to buy, park, use, and operate motor vehicles. Colorado cities, especially Denver, are reducing lanes for cars even as the population increases. These streets are designed to force people to take public transit by making driving harder and intentionally making traffic worse and adding to regional gridlock. And they're starving off street front small businesses. And what's slowing vehicle sales in Colorado? Electric vehicle sales, I should say. 4 out of every 5 new vehicles sold here are light duty trucks. That number, by the way, now is 82%. 82% of everything that's sold in Colorado falls in the category of light duty trucks, pickups, vans, and SUVs. And the Tesla Cybertruck, which is not even in production, is definitely not Colorado range ready. These are just some of the scenes where we actually take this message to legislators and policymakers in the state capitol and across the state through legislative grassroots meetings and or other public events. So, and every year we take our dealers and our board of directors to Washington, D.C. on a fly-in there where we do CADA Project DC in the nation's capital. We also participate in the Denver Wrestlers, a program that was going on yesterday, and we meet with legislators in their hometowns over breakfast, lunch, or dinner. Today we had a lunch meeting at 1:15 with State Senator Stephen Finberg, and we're on a pattern right now, or a plan to do 100 legislative grassroots meetings in 100 days. We'll see how that works out for us. These are scenes in Washington, D.C. on the lower right, or in the Denver Auto Show in the upper right, or at the Colorado Capitol in a committee hearing on the upper left. Next, you have Shoshana Liu, who's the executive director of the Colorado Department of Transportation. And next to her is the director of Ride the Rockies. Oh, and then we have State Senator Rhonda Fields, who's been very understanding and very engaged in the auto industry. In the middle here, we have 2 state legislators, Andy Kerr and Chris Kennedy. And in the middle, we have a group of our dealers at a dealership with State Representative Sirota. So I'm going to pass it over to Kelly Sloan to talk more about the Freedom to Drive Coalition. And I'll stay on and be glad to pipe in whenever we get to the Q&A part.
Thank you, Tim.
Great, thanks.
So Kelly,
Thanks,
I'll
Tim.
have you go ahead and get started.
Great, thanks, Juliet. So yeah, my name's Kelly Sloan. I'm the executive director of the Freedom to Drive Coalition in Colorado. Just to kind of follow up on what Tim said, essentially the coalition was established to advocate for the freedom of Coloradans to move about the state in the manner that best works for them and their families and their businesses. Few things are as important to us as Americans, both personally and economically, as the freedom of mobility. It was an idea that was in many ways kind of invented here, certainly perfected, with the, as Tim mentioned, the invention of the automobile, the development of our interstate system, that kind of thing. So initially the coalition, again, as Tim alluded to, was set up to push back on the zero emission vehicle mandates, the ZEV mandates, which we felt would disadvantage higher classes of motorists in rural areas, small business owners, those who can afford electric vehicles, so on and so forth. To be clear, we're agnostic on what type of vehicle anybody wants to drive. If enough people want to get into the EV market, I'm fine with that. I like the things myself. What we were opposed to were government mandates that were designed to coerce people into those vehicles, and in doing so, in the way that it was structured, was going to shift costs onto again some of those groups I mentioned earlier: people living in rural areas, small business owners for whom an electric vehicle wouldn't work, and millions of others. What it was doing, we felt, was kind of putting the cart before the horse and putting these mandates in before the market was ready for it. EVs really only have made about a 2% impact on inroads on the overall vehicle market, and to try and force that before the market was ready for it was going to have some consequences. So that was initially what the coalition was put together for. Since that time, our mandate, if you will, has evolved, graduated onto looking at some of these issues that Tim brought up in terms of road dieting and issues policies that we feel are, again, designed to coerce people out of their individual automobiles and onto other, maybe more politically correct, if you will, forms of transportation, again, with consequences. So that's kind of what we're looking at doing now. And as we get a little bit closer to legislative session, part of this conversation, and really any conversation about transportation policy, can't avoid the question of transportation funding. That issue kind of fell by the wayside a little bit in the last session because of COVID interrupting everything. But it's a perennial issue that's going to come up again, and it's one that we're definitely involved in, definitely looking at. So issues of transportation policy, transportation funding, sources of that funding, and again, we're kind of agnostic on where the money comes from, whether it's from updating the gasoline tax, which in the state hasn't changed since, I believe, 1993. At the federal level, the gas tax has been the same since the early 80s, I believe. Or if there's other methods to come up with that funding, bonding, what have you. We're kind of agnostic on that. What we are more concerned with is how those dollars are spent. We think it's a far better bang for the taxpayer's buck, so to speak, if those dollars are directed towards areas that will be more useful as things stand. You make sure that our roads, bridges, highways, make sure those are maintained, make sure whatever new infrastructure we need to adapt to our changing demographics and the changing needs and the growing population, make sure that's taken care of first before it gets diverted into perhaps some of these pet projects that may have more ideological bent than a reality-based bent. So, policy-wise, those are some areas we're looking at. On the urban side, again, a lot of these issues with lane restrictions, parking elimination, these type of things that we just feel are type of social engineering that at best is inefficient and at worst is going to create some pretty serious economic and personal consequences for people, and ultimately be counterproductive, as Tim also mentioned earlier. The more you do some of this stuff without the market being ready for it, or without a market there, or without accounting for the specific needs of the community. Again, Denver is not New York. In many ways, thankfully, we're not New York. We don't have the density, but we're not built. The city was not built in a way that really allows for that kind of hyper efficient mass transit, subway system, like so on and so forth, that can be used to great effect in a place like New York or Chicago. We're a far more spread out city. We're people that we spend our recreation time different, our economy's different. And if those factors aren't taken into account, you're going to end up with some unintended consequences. So that's kind of what we do on the policy side. Right now, at this stage in our existence, we're still expanding our coalition. Right now, obviously, we're happy to have the auto dealers as as a partner and a member. Other members include National Federation of Independent Business, Associated Governments Northwest Colorado, weed growers, the motor carriers. So we have a pretty broad coalition covering small business, rural, local government, and industry. And we're growing that coalition as we go out and talk to people and find out what their issues are that they're dealing with in their local communities on transportation, surrounding transportation. And I do have to say, some of our activities were kind of put on hold a little bit because of COVID. One thing we're looking at and we're supporting, and see around, especially Denver, and I think it's happening in a lot of other towns and cities around the state, roads being closed. Roads that aren't used very, very much being closed to help accommodate social distancing for pedestrians, and also like in Larimer Square here in Denver, being closed to accommodate restaurants so they can expand on the street. We support that, obviously. I mean, there's a few other options, I think, available to the state to try and jumpstart the economy again and keep it going to the extent that it can. What we are watching is that when we do get past this and some of these restrictions on the businesses start being lifted, that at least some of these roads start being opened up again. And again, that's because, try not to look at it myopically, look at it a little bit farther ahead, there's going to be some consequences to this. There's other businesses in downtown that rely on people coming in from other parts of the state, other parts of the city. And right now they're suffering because people can't actually get there because these roads are closed. Again, we support the efforts to help the economy as best we can at this time. We do want to make sure that when the time is right, that those roads are opened back up so that people do have access to these businesses, to these parts of the city, and commerce can fully recommence. So that's where we're at. That's what we're doing. That's what we're for. I'd be certainly happy to take any questions.
As would I, if anybody has any, Juliet. Can you hear us, Juliet? Can you hear her?
You're coming in kind of choppy. Pink Floyd said your lips move, but I can't hear what you're saying.
Yes, on to Brian's question, yes, there have been significant disruptions. It's one of our biggest problems right now is supply chain, getting not just the factories open, they're all open and operating, but getting the supplies to the factories so they can build cars. Our biggest challenge today is we're out of cars we're very low on inventory in most product lines. Dealerships that would normally have 600 to 800 units on the ground are sitting with just 60 to 80 units on the ground. So it's only about 10% of total inventory, normal inventory. And that's because of COVID-19 shutdowns, not of the factories per se, but of the suppliers to the factories. I hope that answers Brian Head's question. As far as Denise's question, I have heard that also, but I don't know if that's right or not. It looks like it would be right because that's a very heavily traveled intersection. I think everybody that goes through Westminster goes by that intersection at some point in time. Well, the problem with using transit right now, by the way, even CDC recommended people not use public transit during COVID because it was really kind of dangerous. The MTA, the Metropolitan Transit Authority in New York City, was off 95% just in the month of April alone. RTD was off between 72 and 75%, I believe. So it's not been a really efficient way to get around, or a safe way, I guess, under COVID-19 limitations. They've modified the buses and trains to try to be safer, but over 1,000 of the employees, over 1,000 employees of MTA were actually diagnosed with COVID-19. Some of those died, and it went all the way up to the CEO of MTA. So public transit certainly has its role, but it's not real safe in COVID-19 arena right now.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on that a little bit, I'll just echo what Tim said. Thank God in the last 6 months, a lot of us have had individual vehicles to be able to travel around in, or else there would be very little traveling. And what business and commerce has been able to survive in this environment wouldn't be able to. Like Tim said, transit has its place, and we're obviously not for the elimination of public transit. It doesn't work for everyone, and our position is that we have to live and work in reality. The reality is that most of us, especially in Denver, a place like New York, subway works great. You can have that far to go to a subway station. You can get to Midtown from Queens or a place like Denver, where I live, transit's just not available. Where it is available, we still have the issue with the first and last mile, or the first and last 5 or 6 miles. How do you get to the bus stop or the train station? And once you get off the train, how do you get to where you ultimately want to get to? We just don't have the infrastructure for that. And realistically, we're not going to, especially at least not in the near future, if ever. We're different people. This is a different climate. This is a different geography. It's a differently built city. So what we're saying is our transportation policy has to reflect reality. And if it doesn't, it's going to have, again, consequences, economic, social, so on and so forth. So thank you for the question. I may also add, during the time of COVID, one thing that we've been seeing a lot more of are, some innovations using individual vehicles, drive-in graduations. I know the chamber has done drive-by ribbon cutting. Delivery services like Grubhub, Uber Eats, or so on and so forth. Those can't be accommodated by public transit. You're not going to have the light rail do a drive-by graduation. So, these are some things we need to keep in mind. We all want cleaner air, and as Tim mentioned earlier, we've gotten there with technological advances in the automobile. So in the meantime, while we're having these conversations, let's keep reality in mind. I see Juliet's back. Hi.
Hi. I don't know if you guys can see me or hear me, but I'm so sorry about that.
No problem. Welcome back.
For those of you that may know, I started streaming the other day, and I told you I'm out of state, and I was pitching at a hospitality venue just randomly on their patio, and computer decided to die. So I am now in their lobby. But this question comes to us from Brian, and it's asking, how soon do you expect autonomous or self-driving vehicles to be on the roads? How do you think that will transform our industry?
That's an excellent question, and I'll make a run at that one, Kelly. I follow the autonomous car prognostications and expectations very closely. I'm a personal friend of John Krafcik, who's the CEO of one of the largest, or I would say the largest, autonomous car investments in the world, and that's Waymo, which is a division of Google. I knew John Krafcik when he ran the Hyundai Motor Company. of North America, and before that he was with Ford Motor Company. And he's doing a great job. And I think Waymo, W-A-Y-M-O, is Google's automotive car sector. And they're doing a very professional and safe attempt at making autonomous cars practical. I can't wait for autonomous cars. I can't wait for the day that I can take my personally and privately owned car and let it drive me to my next destination. Basically, it's we all are used to cruise control, and now we have crash avoidance warnings, lane departure warnings. We have cars that will park themselves. We have cars that will unpark themselves. We have cars that will find their next parking spot. The technology gets better and better and better. There's no doubt about that. But it's probably one of the toughest things to bring AI in, that's artificial intelligence in, is the automotive sector, because it's really unbelievable how many things has to be trained for the car to be safe. How many different unique situations that can occur. And I think Waymo is doing it right. I think there are others that are out there that are trying to do it right. But to the question, how soon could we expect it? Well, there were some in 2015 thought that by 2020, the year we're in now, the world would be full of autonomous cars. And so far, there really aren't any that are in practical use anywhere in the world. So I think, again, it's a big challenge. I think it will happen. I think it will transform, as far as transforming the industry. I think it will make it better for consumers if they can drive their car, or if they can let the car drive itself and be driven. But I think most of us as consumers will still want to own our cars, let that car drive me from my garage to my work, or from my work to my garage, but have the ability to take over on that drive anywhere I want and drive it, because some of us do like the name of Kelly's Coalition, that freedom to drive when we want to drive. Now, some, Brian and others may be interested in this. There were some that prognosticated that driverless cars or autonomous cars would reduce traffic congestion. Actually, they'll make traffic worse, because it will by its nature put more cars on the road. Not transit, but cars on the road. So the traffic challenges that we have now, or traffic congestion that we have now, will likely get worse under the autonomous arena, because there will be autonomous Ubers, autonomous Lyfts, and they'll know these miles, these VMTs, or vehicle miles traveled under an REO system, and that's a run empty only. When they're dropping off one passenger on one corner and picking up another passenger on maybe a mile away, or 2 miles away, or 3 miles away, those cars will be completely empty. And we don't have that now, so that there's not empty cars out there taking up our lanes, but under the autonomous self-driving vehicle scenario, there will be. It's an excellent question, I think Brian had asked, and I think it will make many changes. I think it'll be very pro-consumer, but I think it'll be very anti-traffic congestion. It'll make traffic congestion worse.
I think all I would have to add to that is, again, as a coalition, we're agnostic on how people want to get around, whatever works best for them. I think all we would push back on is if there were a government mandate trying to push these onto the market or into the hands of consumers before the market's ready for it. Aside from that, I mean, we just look at the policy. I agree with Tim that these are coming. They're cool. I'm a fan of new technology myself. Not very adept at using it all the time, but I like it. And I'm looking forward to it as well. And the market will adapt. But what we would be opposed to are any attempts to try and manipulate that market before it's ready.
Excellent.
Well, thank you both for addressing that question head on. We have several people that are tuned in with us, a few that kind of hopped in later. This broadcast will be available even after we're done going live. You can always rewind, rewatch it, and give us that hashtag replay. If you do pick up some of the information, have questions on it, but didn't get a chance to answer it, or maybe there was something more contentious you wanted to speak to these folks about, please feel free to DM it to us so we can get it their way. I see with us RTD Director Vince. I also see Denise, Brian Head, and Dice, our board chair that's on here, Donna. We have Bernadette and several others. Thank you so much for spending the afternoon with us very briefly. Before I get wrapped up, I just am curious, how can people reach out to you, Tim? And then Kelly, how would they ask, for more information, clarification, or if they, again, have a different opinion? This entire discussion, the way that I kicked this off was, I've held transportation town halls and various broadcasts over this time of COVID, from RTD, from Commuting Solutions, Smart Commute. We've had CDOT, we've had a variety of folks, and we do that to give you a variety of perspective, understanding, and knowledge so that you can make those informed decisions. So with that, Tim, can you share with me the best way they can reach out to you?
Sure, and it would be probably by email, and that is tim.jackson, so first name dot last name, at Colorado like the state, .auto like a car, AUTO. There's no .com, .net, or .org. It's just .auto, AUTO.
Excellent, thank you. And Kelly, how can they reach out to you directly?
Probably best to go through our website, freedomtodrive.org.
Excellent. So I've placed both Tim's email into this chat section of the video broadcast, in addition to the website, that's freedomtodrive.org, for more information about Kelly's coalition. I don't see any additional questions that are coming to mind, but I don't want to close it out because I have another question for you. And this came to us whenever, earlier Brian had asked the question about COVID and how did that impact the supply chain side? You shared a really great PowerPoint at the start, Tim, I felt, where you captured, what the impact is economically that this industry brings in terms of jobs, in terms of taxes. Did we also see that significant decline, obviously, translate in the purchase of those vehicles and significantly thereafter in registrations?
Right. So when vehicle sales were down, they're down about 17% statewide this year, largely COVID related, I think. But then that means that the sales tax revenues for cities, counties, schools, and special districts are down the same amount. So that's unfortunate. It could be worse. It could be the national number of 20% that's down. So Colorado is actually tracking better on the recovery than the nation as a whole. And but we will. I mean, it's what I am proud to say is that the industry is still on its feet, not on its back. Dealers are still there to serve consumers, and consumers really have never been served any better from the quality of the new car product, quality, durability, longevity, and ability to safely operate has never been better for the auto industry. So that's a good thing consumers can be proud of.
Sorry. Thank you, Tim. I don't know if you can hear me too well now, but we made this broadcast work, even if I have to, shift around to where I'm asked. I appreciate you both, Kelly and Tim, for taking the afternoon with us to give us updates on things. Of course, everybody that's tuned in right now, thank you for spending the afternoon. And for those of you that rewatch this, please make sure that you share the content with folks that might be interested in this topic. And transportation, motor vehicle, all of that is something that impacts everybody in Colorado. So I know that people in your network would benefit from seeing this as well. So with that, I just want to close out. Thank you guys for spending the afternoon with me, and I hope to see you tomorrow. We'll be back at 11 a.m. for our nonprofit corner. We're featuring Lloyd Lewis from ARC Thrift Store. So thank you.
I'm a friend of Lloyd. He's a great guy.
He's pretty phenomenal. So I'm excited to hear about how they've overcome COVID.
Good.
Thanks, Juliet.